I know that one of the most important missions that I have in my goal as a creator is to teach younger people how to own things, how to carve their own path in life a little bit. And it's a lot of the stuff that schools don't really teach. So I would love to ask you if you have, a niece or nephew or one of your kids come to you and they want to know about entrepreneurship, what do you start telling them?
That's a great question. And when I first started out, so when I was young, entrepreneurship was always something that was like deep in my soul, I think I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know how it would manifest over time. I actually, one of the first books that I can remember that almost like really ignited me was Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans book. And it's excerpts of different episodes and interviews that he's did from different entrepreneurs, leaders, authors, poker players, comedians, all these different things. And I remember I had it right next to my bed growing up, and I would read a couple pages here and there throughout my college years. And then it kind of turned into, I think we all go through the Shark Tank era of our life. And so, like, just consuming Shark Tank and it kind of gives you that spirit, right? Where it's like you're watching people like, I built this out of my garage. Now I'm standing in front of millionaires. Now I'm doing this. I quickly realized when I started actually doing entrepreneurship that just reading about stuff and people, and it's inspirational, but it's not always tactical and practical. I think that's what keeps a lot of 13-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 21-year-olds, they never really get past the inspirational phase. They always think they have an idea or they think they want to do something, but they don't know like the next step to take. And so they stick in this Shark Tank phase. That's what I call it. I remember my best friend in high school, I used to call him. I'd be like, I got an idea. And I'd tell him the idea. And then the next day I'd have a new idea. And it just kept becoming this cyclical thing of idea after idea with no tactical or practical step afterwards. So it wasn't until I started really consuming people like Sam Parr, like Alex Hermosi. Alex Hermosi is a great person to study, especially when you're going from. We talk about 0 to 1 a lot online, right? So we talk about how do I go from idea to, okay, somebody's paying me to do this. And I think a lot of the foundational things that I would tell my niece, my nephew, my daughters, is first you have to solve problems that people have. And that's why I love the lemonade stands, right? You're sitting out on a hot day, you got a lemonade stand, people are sweating, people are thirsty, you're handing them a glass of lemonade. When I was starting Legacy Builder, people were like, I want content. I don't have time to write content. So I write content for them. It was a problem that I could solve. But then what you see is when you get into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of people solving problems for people. So then it comes into competition, different things like that. So that's when it really comes down to like character, how you deliver service, fulfillment. And so that's when you start studying, like one of my favorite books is Unreasonable Hospitality. I've always embodied that spirit of unreasonable hospitality. I didn't know somebody wrote a book about it. I'm obsessed with restaurants and how they work from the moment you walk into a restaurant to sit down to the dinner experience to when you leave. I draw a lot of inspiration on entrepreneurship in daily lives. You can ask my wife when I walk into any business or anything. I'm not judging them, but I'm observing. One of my favorite recent stops was the Normal brand. And the Normal brand is a store started by two brothers. They have multiple locations around the Southeast.
Hmm.
And they opened a store here in Birmingham, Alabama. I walk into the store, instantly greeted. I'm offered an adult beverage, which is awesome, but it was like 11 a.m. I wasn't ready for an adult beverage at that time. I start looking around. My wife, we're picking shirts. My kids are in the store with me. It actually happens to be my oldest's birthday. So we buy a couple items and we leave. A couple weeks later, I get a letter, handwritten postcard from the person at the store, and they said, "Hey, Clifton, thank you so much for bringing your family into the store. We hope that your daughter had a great birthday."
Wow.
And it's little things like that, right? It's like now I wear their hats. Anytime I'm near a store, I'm always going to pop in. The coolest thing is a year later, I went to a different store in Nashville, Tennessee. It was actually just south of there. Got the same letter from the guy that I talked to in Nashville, Tennessee, because they had my address saved in the records.
Crazy.
So it's a standard of excellence that has continued to carry over time, even a year after the fact. So I would just give them advice of, first, you have to get from inspiration to actually going through the idea. So every phase, there's not one book or one mentor or one person to study. There's almost like this collection of people that I study for every phase of business. If I'm thinking of how to take an idea and actually turn it into a business, I study this person. If I'm thinking of how to like tactically bootstrap, I'm studying this person. If I was raising capital, I'd study a completely different person. And then the books and things. And I think the last 2.5 years have been crazy for me. I started with a laptop on a couch, and now I run from all intents and purposes, a successful business. Quit my 9 to 5 job doing all this. And the only way I was able to do that is from studying people where I was weak at the time that I needed it the most. And I had to find that person.
One of my friends, Jamie Masters, talks about the idea of just in time learning, like identifying what your own personal next need is, and then being like, okay, who's the best person that I have access to in some way to go learn from right now? And let's learn from them. I was trapped very much in Shark Tank mode myself because I was doing the opposite of just in time learning. I was reading every business book that I heard was good for people that wanted to learn entrepreneurship, right? And so I wonder if that's sort of a rite of passage. Like we each need to get a little bit addicted to the learning ourselves and then transition into the action, or if we can learn it from others maybe a little bit quicker. And my hope is that a podcast like this really does exactly that, like helps that process get sped up a little bit. You mentioned the idea also of the lemonade stand. I think it's Hormozy that I heard talk about a similar vibe of, if you had a marketing teacher teaching what the best market was, and he asked a class to come up with ideas. They might get into advertising, they might get into copywriting, they might talk of all these different ideas, and the marketing teacher lets them think of all this idea and then says, no, it would be a starving crowd. If you were opening a hot dog stand, you would want that starving crowd. And I think that's such a simple thing that can be translated into any business that we're trying to work on. You had such a thorough answer that we could talk through that, each of those little buckets, for like an hour each. So one thing I know that would be really valuable to people is to hear how you got out of Shark Tank mode.
A lot of failure. I think I have 3 degrees, which is insane to say. I have an undergrad in accounting, I have a master's in higher education, I have a doctorate in organizational leadership. And it wasn't until one night I was scrolling Twitter and I saw this guy. I think it was this like watershed moment where I saw a guy tweet. He said, "I make $1,000 a week online." And at this point, by all intents and purposes, I was on a fast track to success in my 9 to 5 job. But I was still very much struggling financially, credit card debt, student loan debt, all these things, like most of the people in our society are. And he was selling a $29 Gumroad course, and I bought the course. And launched my account that night. My wife was asleep. I'll never forget. She woke up. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm starting a Twitter account." And she said, "What does that mean?" I said, "I have no idea. No idea." So I launch this account. I start writing. And I think writing is such a clarifying thing. I write every day. And it helps me really think through the problems that I'm trying to solve, the things I'm trying to do. But it wasn't until I really started trying different business models and learning how hard it is to start a business and be successful that I started kind of piecing those things together. And I think it's that quick feedback loop. I can't remember who it is, but there's you should always extend your time horizons when you think about success, right? But you should also have a quick feedback loop where you have to realize that the track that you're on isn't going to manifest into success. And that's a hard distinguished moment, right? It's very hard to distinguish that. It's like, so me, for example, the first thing I did was affiliate marketing. I got into affiliate marketing like everybody does because I call it the 7 rings of online hell. Like you get on, it's affiliate marketing, e-commerce, Amazon, FBA, and now 3 years later, I know all these things were successful at one point, and you can still be successful at it if you have the right resources, different things like that. But most people just have timed the market in a way where they were early to Amazon FBA, where they were early to eBay drop shipping, where they were early to this. So I quickly learned with affiliate marketing, you have to have an audience. I didn't have an audience. E-commerce, I learned you have to have an audience and you have to have capital. You have to know what's going on. I didn't have capital, so I couldn't do that. So as I kept going, I have Sonoma towels in my garage that I try to sell. I remember getting on with an Amazon agent to get my Amazon seller account, paid $40 for that. That didn't pan out. So as I went, I kept learning. I was like, okay, I'm kind of getting there. At least I'm getting the practice of I'm going to do something. I try it. I get a little bit down the road. I'm like, man, I don't really think I want to do this. It wasn't until January where I really like this light bulb moment said, you just need to build an audience. Like you need distribution. You don't even know the problem you need to solve. That Hermosi quote was the best thing. Where is my starving crowd?
Mhm.
And so when I started writing and then I started looking, if you take a step back, now that you understand the basic principles of business, that you need an offer that is at that moment necessary for the people that you're trying to sell it to. I was very early and fortunate in ghostwriting. I was one of the first people to get into ghostwriting, personal brand building at the start of it. And I got in with a guy, started, I call it entrepreneurship. And I think entrepreneurship is the fastest path to entrepreneurship. And I think it's almost like the old school apprenticeship for a swordsmith. If you want to open a sword stand, back in the day, you're like, okay, I don't know how to do that. I'm good. I'm okay with metal, but like I have to find a place and I have to find people to sell it to and I have to build a reputation. So I just started working for another ghostwriting agency, started writing like 30 to 40 threads a month. And I started getting the skill, but at the same time, I'm seeing how do I deal with customers? How do I deal with clients?
Mhm.
And then once I felt enough confidence and competency in the skill, a guy came to me and said, "You can do this on your own." And he showed me the basic what an agency was. And when you say a school, like nobody teaches you what an agency is in college. I mean, I have an undergrad in business. Not one time was I told how to start an agency, which is insane because it's pretty much if you have a skill that you can sell online, you can start an agency. Um, but I had to learn from a guy that was about 8 years younger than me, and he just kind of knew the skill, so he taught it to me, and then I started signing clients. And I think that's to go from, hey, I have this Shark Tank, I just have idea after idea after idea. Once you find that moment, and ghostwriting was that for me, and I think to really lock in on a road and extend your time horizon, especially in terms of business, you have to have a product or service that people are going to pay you for that you know you can deliver or over deliver on. And I lean more over deliver than deliver. And once you have that, you should ignore every other opportunity. And you should just continue to compound that. But a lot of people bang their head against the wall and they're like, "Well, I know people need." Well, you don't, if people aren't paying you, they don't need it.
This feels like a Gary V moment where we can be like, you know what? Drop the mic. I've given my speech. Now you go execute because I want you to stop consuming and start creating. It's so on point, and I can relate so much myself. My kind of brand name, the catchphrase that I've always been using is just keep learning. That's pretty broad. It dips into education, it dips into teaching, it dips into life advice, parenting. We can go all over the place. But the one specific thing, I used to have my handle just tries. And that's because when I said to my wife, yeah, I'm starting a Twitter account, I'm starting an Instagram account. Well, what are you going to do on there? I have no clue. And so I wanted just tries to be at the front of my brand. There's also an undertone of like, um, wanting to hide a bit from public and from society. Like, so it was sort of like my version of Slim Shady. Like, maybe if I show up like this, it'll be easier because people won't actually know it's me. My buddies won't see it. My parents won't see it. My colleagues won't see it. I'm super happy to have switched back to my real name. But the reason I bring this all up is because I have this book right beside me called Designing Your Life, which is done by the team at IDEO, Stanford Design School. And that's the exact premise of applying design thinking to your life is, can you create the time horizon from birth to death, which is pretty damn long, but also have quick feedback loops, and they measure life's fulfillment based on, I think, 4 different bar graphs that you should be measuring every so often and trying to tweak and optimize for. Now, what you're saying is kind of applying that to the business stuff. And man, can I relate, because I started a hoodie brand. I lost my Amazon affiliate.
Amazon seller account.
Yeah, exactly. Like all these different things that you can try en route to finding, writing and podcasting for now, and some coaching that has just been one of those kind of light bulb moments, I guess, like the signals, the green lights, as Matthew McConaughey says, that I can start pursuing that. And so when you got into ghostwriting for the first time, you mentioned the idea of learning from someone younger than you, which I think just shows a bit of your character too. Some other people wouldn't be willing to do that, whether it's podcast agency, writing, Twitter threads, Instagram reels, like whatever. That idea of agency that's not taught in business school, and or what you learned from him, like what were some of the things that really helped you that you didn't know at that point?
I mean, business is very hard when you're in it, but from a foundational component, it's very simple. It's offer, fulfillment, offer, fulfillment, offer, fulfillment, offer, fulfillment. Now, there's a bunch of things in between there that have to happen for it to be successful, but I think one thing that played to my success was almost being crazy enough to try and fail and not have that ego of like, I I don't really know exactly how I'm going to go about doing this. I think a lot of people try to like, what are we taught in business? Have a business plan. Know exactly how you're going to do every little thing in your business before you start a business. Me, I was like, okay, I have a skill. People need it. I'm going to sell it. And then I'm going to, I remember on my first like 10 sales calls, people would ask me like, well, who have you done this for? And I would say, nobody. I would say myself. And I think case study number one mentality is very important. You could probably relate to that. The reason you can sell coaching is because you've done it. Like you're teaching a past version of yourself, something that you already know. You're just a couple steps ahead of the people that you're coaching, or sometimes multiple steps ahead. And when I started, it was like, hey, I had already built an audience. I had done the thing. I didn't necessarily know how I was going to do it for other people, but I learned and I continued to iterate and perfect over time. And I'm still iterating and perfect over time. That's what I love about owning a business is when I see a problem, I can instantly fix it. I don't have to go through bureaucratic crap. I don't have to go pitch a presentation. I'm like, this is a problem and it needs to be fixed within like now or very soon, because we're not going to keep clients or sign clients if we don't fix this problem. So I think it's having that reckless abandonment to say, hey, I'm just going to do the thing. Then I would sign a client and I would say, okay, I need to know as much about you. Let's do an interview. Oh, I need to know more. Let's fill out a form. Okay, I wrote the content. Oh, you hate it. okay, why did you hate it? How do I avoid that next time? What were the things that somebody hates? And now eventually, and I mean, man, when I first started, I had so many opportunities to quit. I mean, I had clients fire me, I had clients ghost me, all because I was learning in real time how to run a business. And at any of those moments, all I did was take those failures and apply it to the next client, and to the next client, and to the next client. And eventually, you have a service where all those problems that you initially had, you work through the bugs almost like you're building a SaaS product. I mean, some of the most successful SaaS products, this is what I love about what they're doing over at Beehive. I was reading Tyler's newsletter the other day, and Big Desk Energy. If you're not subscribed to that, you should be. But he was talking about how they ship updates before they're complete.
Right.
And this is a multi-million-dollar organization, and they ship the updates before they're complete because they want the user feedback in real time to be able to improve the update. So now they'll ship it and they'll get a lot of flack for it because there might be bugs or it might not work appropriately, but they're also getting quick feedback, and they're known as the person in the company that ships updates fast. So I think that's what you got to do to really get out of that mode in that moment.
I'm super biased when it comes to applying sports to life or business. And what you just talked about is like just such a perfect one of the many examples of a reason why I am biased for that. And it's because, like, if you think of being a professional athlete over the course of, let's say, 10, 12, 15 years, that's pretty self-explanatory. But also you can even think of it in like high school for 4 years, you know, from freshman to senior, or college from freshman to senior. Over those 4 years, you have X number of practices each year. You have your own workouts, then you have your games. And I remember, rest in peace, one of my most influential adults in my life when I was a teenager pulled me aside on the sideline, put his hand on my shoulder pads, and said, "You're going to get beat like that so many times over the next 4 years if you're going to be as great as you can be. And the only thing holding you back is if you keep going and understand that the position you play," because I played corner in, you know, American tackle football. You're out on an island by yourself and you're playing against some of the best players in the country, kind of thing. He's like, that's going to happen again. If you sit here and think like it's not going to happen again, then you're not going to play full speed. You know, you fast forward 5 years, I became an all-star level college football player. And I look back at that moment as one of those times that I definitely could have quit had he not said something like that in that moment, you know? And that power to just keep going and add new skill sets or new things that the next time you don't make that mistake over time just builds kind of this, to use a business term, beast of a personal brand, but just in life, that whole person, you know? When it comes to that idea of building the overall personal brand, you mentioned the importance of distribution. I think that's something else that's so new to people that we'd have the risk of like the curse of knowledge right now, because you and I both get it. But someone's asking about what a brand is and why it's important to build. What would you want to share with them?
Yeah, just to your point, love sports analogy. So uh, I'm fortunate that most of our team has played sports in some capacity. I actually played Division II football at the University of West Alabama, where I was fortunate enough to start at center for 3 years, and that resiliency that you learn in sports, it translates beautifully to business. Just I was undersized, and there's a lot of things that I had to overcome in my college career, but it's just that constantly figuring it out and learning what works and what doesn't work, and not being beat down by loss and failure and hard days. I always there was this, you talk about people influential in your life. There was, when I was in high school, I was just coming into high school. I I graduated high school at 305 pounds, but when I was a 10th grader in high school, I was 240. So I was just kind of growing into it, right? And I had a terrible day at practice. And this Jared Smith, that was his name. Jared Smith comes up to me, and he could tell I'm like down on myself. And he just looked at me and he said, "Hey, just don't have 2 bad days in a row." And the number of times I've told myself, "Hey, just don't have 2 bad days in a row," throughout my life, from that guy just pulling me aside as like a 16, 15-year-old kid, like it's such a easy frame. It's like, okay, I had a bad day today, but just don't have 2 bad days in a row. And I love that. And now I'll segue to the question that you asked me. There's a paradigm shift in marketing that's happening right before our eyes that a lot of people like you and I, just from the concept of knowledge, are seeing, and we know it. And the paradigm shift is we're getting away from legacy brands that are standing up on their own just because of beautiful design and first mover advantage. And we're starting to see the rise of personal brands and owning your own distribution happening. And we're seeing it time and time again in real time online. We talked about Dad Gang before this moment. Bart's done a great job with that. I mean, they've sold almost 150,000 hats this year. But when he started, he was just selling a couple hats to some dads in his area, right? And so you keep going, and like the reason that he's been so successful is not because he wins in meta ads or he's beating every hat company, but he started a brand that resonates more than just a company page. He started a movement. And every individual, from a personal branding standpoint, I talk about this all the time when I'm teaching personal branding. Okay, there's so many people that have podcasts, right? So many people. What differentiates your podcast from every other person's podcast? Yourself. Your own unique stories, your own unique insights, how you frame the questions that you ask, the people that you bring on. Those are the things that distinguish your podcast. There's a ton of ghostwriters and content agencies in the space. Why is a guy in Birmingham, Alabama able to go from sitting on a couch to working with 8, 9, even 10-figure CEOs and founders and helping them build their personal brands? Because of my own unique viewpoints, my ability to extract ideas, and my ability to bring out authenticity in people in terms of their brands. And that's a true personal brand cannot be void of authenticity. It's the only differentiator in the market. So when you're launching that kind of stuff, a lot of people will start copycatting other big people. We talk about Hermosi, we talk about Gary Vee, we talk about Dan Coe, even Justin Welsh from a solopreneur standpoint. The things that they have going for them is, number one, time in the game. They kept going and they kept compounding over time, but they also stay true to themselves. Gary Vee cusses. Alex Hermosi teaches. Dan Coe's a philosopher. Justin Welsh works 2 hours a day and makes multi-million dollars with a VA. Like, there's all these things that happen, but you can tell their personality come out in their content. And that's what we do with our clients, and that's what I do with myself. And that's the finding out process, right? Yeah, the only thing that separates you from other people that you're competing with in business is your own personal authenticity and the ability to tell your story and leverage it over time. And that's what I think. I took a story of a kid that was adopted at 3 months old, that battled with drug addiction and depression at a young age through my teenage years, that overcame all that, ended up playing college football. And I didn't take that and start a speaker series and start talking to people, but I took that and started a movement that everybody should tell their story, vulnerable or not, and leverage it to connect with their audience on a deeper level. And then, oh, by the way, I love personal branding and I love building brands. I'm an expert in that now, but at first I was just that kid. I was just that guy that was trying to figure it out. And I think that is the moment when people realize that you don't have to separate this is business Clifton versus this is Clifton in human life. When you can mold those two together, I talk about this analogy. Who do you want to work with? You want to work with the guy that you want to be trapped at an airport bar with for 3 hours, right? And that's the type of mentality that you have to have when you're thinking about a personal brand. And that's why I think everybody, even the most successful companies, should invest in their CEO, founders, co-founders, C-suite level executives. Because when you use that conduit of personal brand and leveraging somebody's story, you're not only pouring into the people that are working for you, because that's the thing. Well, I don't want to build their brand because they're just going to leave. Well, they're going to leave either way. But when you're building their personal brand and you're pouring in, it's an on-ramp to your organization and to your product. It's a win-win situation because you're helping them grow and you're helping your business grow.
Damn. That's good. I don't often ask yes or no questions because, as I've become more of an expert podcaster over the years, it's like I recognize that a lot of times that just keeps the conversation pretty short for obvious reasons once you get used to doing these kinds of things. But I'm curious, have you listened to or read Randy Pausch's The Last Lecture?
No. No.
You and I have a lot in common. One of the things is this idea of education and teaching. And Randy Pausch was an incredible professor, but got cancer pretty young, knew he was dying, had 3 young, I believe all girls as well, and decided, I'm going to try and find a silver lining here. I'm going to do a 90-minute lecture called The Last Lecture. I'm going to teach all the things that I wish I taught in school. And it gives me chills just thinking about that and how that connects to the story you just started sharing. He talked about the 7 things that I learned from football that everyone could use to make their life better. And that's so much of what we were just kind of touching on. But I wanted to make sure to share that resource with you because it is definitely a good one. Every few years, if I'm feeling a little bit down about my own stuff, I just put that on in the background while I'm on for a walk or something, and it kind of re-energizes me. I love that idea of being trapped in an airport bar for 3 hours because that's the advice I give to new podcasters or people who are struggling with figuring out interviewing. I'm like, look, I don't really overthink it anymore. I have topics, I do research, but at the end of the day, if I were stuck in an airport with someone and we were having a great conversation about those topics that I researched, I always know that it would go well. So just pretend there's not a camera and a microphone and you're stuck in an airport. I never added the bar part. That adds a little bit of visualization, I suppose. Might even make it easier. But certainly that's the analogy that I give podcasters. So that's definitely something that I'm going to write about. When it comes to the story that you started sharing, with my own research, I had jotted down adoption, attachment, and any advice. Could be adoptive parents, could be, people who have been adopted, but I know something that I shared with you that I actually don't share a lot online because I know it's her story. And as she grows up a little bit, maybe she'll share. And so for me, figuring out how much or how little to share is always an interesting topic. But our daughter is adopted as well. She was born at 6 months old. 3 pounds. I doubt she'll ever get to the 305 mark. She was addicted to drugs and homeless at the time and is turning 11 years old and just thriving when at the time of adoption, they had told us, she may never walk, she may never talk, you don't know what to expect. So would you be prepared for that? And I said, yeah, of course, we're going to ride this out and just do the best we can to give her the best life possible. To whatever extent you feel open to sharing, I think you mentioned how important it is to share our own journeys and not just separate business Clifton from life Clifton. So for all of our listeners, maybe they haven't heard the story. So if you were to share some of it that you think could help people or give a little bit of insight, where would you go with that?
Well, first of all, I'll qualify it by saying all of us have stories. We all have trials and things we go through, and the number one thing that a mentor said to me one time is at its root, everybody's broken in some capacity. Um, and when you see the world through that frame, it's really easy to have a gentle heart for people and for society. My story is, and I gave a little life to it just a second ago, but very similar to your daughter. My mother battled with prostitution, with drug addiction. And I was born, and about 3 months old, they found me. Hadn't been tended to in a while, and my dad and my adopted mother took me in. And I actually didn't find out I was adopted until 9 years old. I was My adopted mother passed away about a week before I turned 8, and then I kind of it's funny, man. When you're a kid, nothing you don't realize things. You're just a kid, right? And uh, I realized that my last name was different than my father's, and because they didn't go through with a name change process at the time. And so I go and I'm like, and then kind of the story comes out. Hey, you were adopted, this and this and this and this. And I struggled, man. I struggled with who I was. Not the fact that, I mean, my dad loved me and he poured into me. He was a great father. Showed up, still a great dad. Man calls me every day. If I don't talk to him for a day, he calls me the next day and he says, "Hey, are you okay? I haven't heard from you in a while." Just a great man. I wouldn't be who I am today without him. I could have a whole podcast episode of just the things that he taught me. But I started falling into drugs, marijuana, harder drugs at times. And I remember the story of a time I was waiting on a street corner. It was about 1 a.m. It was about 5 miles from my home. And I was waiting on a ride and it never came. So I start walking home at the time, and I was at 11. I was like, this isn't it. Something has to change. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep counting on these people. I don't want to continue this generational pattern of drugs and alcohol and things like that. And so when I got home, I told my dad the next day that I wanted to play football. And I started playing football, and football saved my life. It quite frankly saved my life. I would have ended up being a drug dealer or doing things like that. I always tell people that I use my drug dealer energy to run a business. I just channel it a lot better. But like I started playing football, and I just left that on that 5 mile walk home. I left that life behind me. I still battle with depression, uh, moments of doubt, questions of whether I wanted to live or not in my teenage years. And when I was headed to college, I got a scholarship right at the end of high school. A backup center had gone down, and they needed a backup, so I went up there, and I was on a car ride with Jason Jordan. That was his name, just an all American name. And we're headed up to the University of West Alabama, and he looks at me, and I'm still a depressed kid that still doesn't know, like, doesn't have a lot of self-confidence. And he said, "Hey man, these people don't know you. Nobody knows you. You can be whoever you want to be when you get up here. You can change." And when I got up there and I stepped out of that car in Livingston, Alabama, I decided to be a different person. I decided to be positive. I decided to say yes to more things. And I just kept going. In football, I kept going. In school, I kept going. I started making new friends. I started embodying this new identity, and I continued that. But it wouldn't be a story if I struggled with PTSD. I mean, call a spade a spade. I went through a lot of therapy, and it wasn't until probably I started this entrepreneur journey and I was able to really afford the help that I needed. Um, I went through a lot of trauma therapy to deal with the trauma that I was still carrying in my life, and to forgive the people in my life and my past self and let go of that, that I can start feeling again. And I'm happy to say that I can do that now. And I kind of went through that, all of that, to get to the moment where I could learn. And I just tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm not any different than anybody else. I just kept seeing problems emotionally in my life that were affecting my wife, affecting my ability to be a good husband, a good father, a good friend. And I didn't, instead of looking inward, I started looking outward and seeking help. One of my favorite books is Abba's Child. It's an incredible book about a pastor that served for 20 years and realized that he had basically just been doing it superficially. And he went to this cabin and looked inward and basically showed, and he had a similar story to me and your daughter. I'd recommend that book. It's a great book. Um, but that book helped me out so much, just understanding like who I was as a person, and what trauma really was. And now I'm this guy, and for a long time I was whoever I needed to be to the person I was in front of me. And now I'm myself, and I want to be the best version of myself. And I seek joy. And it just took time, man. It takes time and repetition, and it takes being honest with yourself and the people around you.
I want to say something before I forget to say it. It's slightly off topic, but if ever, you're going through another tough day, or like going through it a little bit, and like it's people at home are just a little too close to chat with or whatever, or even your buddies just, voice note, or you have my cell phone now too. So feel free to connect at any time, because I know that a lot of this stuff, of course, a lot of this stuff can be cyclical, and I jotted down while you were writing the topics of depression, anxiety, drug dealer energy, football saving you, therapy, grief and trauma, self confidence, finding a new identity. And I really could have kept going, but those were the things that I could immediately connect with, both through my own life, my daughter's, and very much so in the work that I do, because I couldn't really handle mainstream education and teaching, both at the collegiate university level or high school, because of a lot of the things that we might have to get into on another episode about how slow it changes, and how much I was seeing kids kind of fall by the wayside and through the cracks, get kicked out of school and stuff, when they had beautiful minds, but it didn't fit the system. And so I found myself working in education still, somewhat traditional teacher, but I go around to jails, a center for addictions, a school for teen moms, school for human trafficking, school for mental illness, a school for homelessness and crisis. And we have 17 sites where we provide high school education to youth going through those things. And we work really closely with their therapists and an entire multi-dimensional team that helps them get through high school and kind of find a pathway. And that's what I'm trying to take to the internet world, right? Because I get to meet, call it 20 kids a year. I'm like, well, there's probably 20 million who could use some of this learning. So how do we really help them, And specifically when thinking about that topic, I'm so happy because of what you've been able to build and are just getting started building, that you found stuff like therapy. You've found a mentor who was able to help you, find that new identity and start believing in yourself a bit. A lot of people don't. So if someone's listening to this and they think of therapy and they're like, yeah, that's not for me, what advice would you give them? Or why do you think that you were able to find those things that helped you turn it around when maybe some others aren't?
There's definitely a stigma in mental health, especially among everybody, but I'll speak specifically to men. I think pride is a hell of a thing, isn't it? Is a hell of a thing. And as basic human beings, we want to be able to fix our own problems, and we don't want to admit weakness. And we just kind of take life for what it is. And somewhere along the way, I think it was because I was always so prone to saying like, I'm gonna be the first person in my family to overcome these things, and I don't have to be this way. Um, I think for people that are considering like whether, I think everybody could use a dose of therapy to some degree. I think it's not, it's like almost finding a, I like the belay model. So a belayer, when you're rock climbing, if you've ever been rock climbing or not, there's a guy climbing a mountain, and there's a guy holding the rope. And a lot of people think that the guy holding the rope, his job is if the person falls, they're going to catch them, you know. But really, the belayer's job is to help the person climbing spot the next path to go up and to complete the climb. And when I think about therapy, it's that person that is spotting those either good paths or bad paths, and helping you kind of figure out that climb that you're on and the next step to take. Because when you don't know the next step to take, you're trapped. You're paralyzed by the fear of what step should I take, good or bad. And sometimes you just need that validation from an unbiased source of, hey, you're not taking that step. Hey, you're not spending that money on your business because of all the money problems you had when you were a kid. Hey, you're not doing this because you're worried about this. Hey, you're not doing that because you're worried about this. And I've had people like, I'm a hungry person. Anybody that spends 30 minutes with me understands that I am just motivated for success. But the only reason I'm able to do that is because of people. Online community is amazing, but I get on it with people. I start talking about all the stuff that's happened over the last 2 years. And then I start talking about all the stuff that's going to happen. And they always stop me and they say, hey, man, good job. You know, and they make me pause and say, hey, look at all the stuff that you've done up to this point. We don't take enough pauses in life. And we could talk about the pandemic a little bit, but in 2020, I paused. Everybody paused. The nation paused. And I looked in the mirror and I said, I don't like my life right now. And then that was the starting point of the new drive. But it's just, I think people need to kind of get out of their own way and say like, and because therapy is only good if you're ready for it. Like if you're not even ready, but if you're willing to accept the help. Because I can go into therapy and be like a pig-headed guy that doesn't want to listen, and I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm an open book. I talk all the time about all this stuff. Like, but a lot of people go in there and they're just like firmed up and they're not going to say anything. But you have to kind of get out of your own way and see the bigger picture. And I mean, for me, it was when I got married, when I had kids, and people say it and you can say it, but when you have kids, all the selfishness goes away. It should. Like, I looked at these children and I said, they need the best version of me. I can't, all the good and the bad that you have, when you have kids, you're going to imprint that on them, both good and bad. And so that's when I really started honing in on how can I be the best version of myself to give my kids the best chance that they have. And I think that's important to think about.
Yeah, that's huge. My therapist was sharing with me the idea that we can always get into kind of reactive mode when we're really struggling and going through it. And that there's no denying that that's when he serves the greatest purpose, but that we should also tap into proactive mode as best as we can. And my story with my therapist is a fascinating one too, that he even is crazy for me to talk about. There's a long version, but the short version is that he's ultimately ended up being my therapist over the course of like 25 years. And so that's a very long time. We talk about time horizons. So the way that he goes about supporting me right now is very different than when I was a 15-year-old kid. And a lot of that is around like teaching the underlying concepts and the foundational stuff. But we also got into a conversation about when would it make sense for my daughter to tap into proactive therapy mode. And that's debatable, but we talked about readiness. We talked about the ability to have her foundation met at home first, and a whole bunch of other things that, again, would create an entire other episode. But I think you just sharing the idea that you go to therapy and maybe even posting about that or sharing on this episode right now, whenever I do as well, people will reach out, usually behind the scenes, because they're still kind of shy, and say, "Oh, I didn't know that you go to therapy." Like, it creates this domino effect that I think is really powerful. And mostly, I just want to say thank you for being open to share about that.
That's so important, man. Every time I share my story online, that's how you and I met. Um, People reach out to me and they're like, "Thank you. I went through this. I was adopted. I go through depression. I do this." And I don't share it for me, I share it for that, just to put light to a fact that so many people are sitting there just hoping somebody, like, for that moment of like, oh man, I'm not alone. And I think that's so important, like as men and as leaders, as people in our lives, like you got to share the vulnerable stuff, because it's not it people are do everybody's broken. And when you share vulnerabilities in your life, you give people the opportunity to open up to you. And it's very important, especially in social media.
When you said that everybody's broken part, it brought me back to, I was sitting on a train yesterday doing a little bit of writing by hand to transfer later into the book that I'm typing. And I wrote the line that, look, I could have wrote this book 20 years ago, but I didn't, because I felt like only Tony Robbins or Oprah or people who have big brands, tons of experience, and all these frameworks are the people who should write books. And I regret not writing it when I was that age. And that's why I'm writing it now for you, is to tell you that you have an important story. Everyone has a story to share. And the light bulb moment for me was realizing that it's not even necessarily that someone is right or wrong. And I think that's what holds people back from sharing a philosophy online, from writing a book, is because they're like, well, maybe somebody else is right. I'm wrong. I need to go learn more to make sure that my
Yeah,
philosophy, my frameworks, my mental models that I can share with people are the right ones. And really, there is no right or wrong. It's just share your damn story. We can all learn from it.
100%, man. And that's what keeps a lot of people from posting online is fear of backlash. Um, it's kind of a tough skin thing, though. You just have to, there's always going to be people that disagree with you in life. I mean, there will. And shelling up and uh, dimming your light to avoid that isn't going to help anybody, especially yourself.
Yeah, it's not worth it. And I think that aside from just the tough skin, I do think that that was one of the big moments. Again, curse of knowledge. I didn't realize it's kind of just a math thing. The hate will scale with the love, even if your story is awesome. Like, there's going to be more of it. And so, definitely getting into that was a huge, I kind of picture like hurdles, and you got 20 hurdles around a track, building a personal brand or getting into being an online creator. And one of those hurdles at some point fairly early that was a massive unlock for me was realizing that's just okay. I don't need to stress about the haters, so to speak. Naturally, we get to the point where these episodes are so damn good, but we need to wrap and do some rapid fire questions. And I always have like a million more directions we could go in. Before we do wrap, I think something that creates a really good through line is storytelling. And similar to the idea that there are so many frameworks out there that there's no right or wrong answers, I think people would be really curious to know your answers, though, or your version of that. You're a really good storyteller. I think I set a new record. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I jotted down 10 topics that I could write about that have come up in this episode.
Nice.
That's probably from 10 stories you told. So if you were to just give some people some understanding of what storytelling is that maybe isn't taught in 12th grade English class at high school, what's storytelling according to Clifton?
That's a good question. To me, storytelling is explaining to people in a way that they can comprehend it. I'm a huge analogy guy. I love that. I love parables. I love the things because like there's concepts and then there's stories. And to me, storytelling is taking a concept that could be hard to understand and being able to explain it in a moment. I mean, I could tell you, and we'll just use one example from this episode. I could tell you, hey, I decided to change my life at 11 years old. And you're like, cool, that's great, man. Or I could tell you, I was on a street corner and I took a 5 mile walk home and I did this, or I was in my living room floor contemplating if I should be on this earth, and it adds weight. And then let's not get that big, right? Let's say like, hey, like I started a hat company and I did this. No, I saw dads struggling and I wanted a way to unite a bunch of dads, and so I started this hat company. And then when I see another dad with that hat on, I know that he gets it, right? Like stories start movements. That's what stories do. Every one of us has a unique set of stories inside of us, and storytelling unlocks the ability for human connection. That's all storytelling does. It helps learning, it helps connection, it helps articulating ideas in a way that people can consume them. That's why we teach children through stories. That's why we're so addicted to movies and TV shows and all these things, because they're stories and they connect with us on some type of level. So storytelling to me is a gateway to human connection at its core.
That's beautiful. It was one of those questions that I think is going to almost become a theme question, because I just love hearing from different people about how they think of the idea of storytelling. We can go a layer deeper into the specifics of writing, but I think overarching when it comes to story, you have podcast, you have video, you mentioned movies, you have writing, then you have all of these different mediums through which we can tell stories. So it's a really interesting topic to me. I love it. We'll definitely fire off these rapid fire questions. Before we do, on these topics, we got into so much or otherwise, is there something that you think we'd be not touching on that you would like to share before we wrap for this episode?
Just super quickly, in the concept of entrepreneurship and like starting out, just to hammer home that it's not out of your reach. Like if you want to do something and if you have a concept, you should go for it. Because that regret mindset of like, maybe I'll get to it one day or anything like that. I mean, we're at the age now where we see people that we went to high school with passing away, that we hear stories of tragedy, right? And I think just going for it, having that going for it mentality is very important. So I think that's something that I would just want to hammer home.
Love that. The painting that sits behind me right now as I create this, my dad did as a moment of therapy for him. People spread ashes out in the ocean or whatever, different things. This painting actually has both my brother's ashes in the leaves of it. My two younger brothers passed away, and that, not a day, let alone an hour, really, to be honest, goes by where it's like they're not pushing me a little bit to keep going those times I want to give up. So I'm so grateful that I'm pursuing this. I've kind of figured it out. My next goal is, how do I help more people figure that out? And so I really appreciate you sharing that.
It's a good goal.
Think so. It's a good one. And then, like we talked about earlier, it's easy to have the broad mission where you can't separate business Justin from life storytelling Justin. Now it's like within business Justin, which was another one of those hurdles for me, recognizing that you can go niche with an offer. You could go niche with a specific newsletter, or you can go niche in different areas. I really struggled with that about a year or two ago. And so figuring out that is the next hurdle. So the rapid fire ones are one thing that you yourself are learning right now. Could be off topic from this even.
Tempered. Tempered is a word that I've been dwelling on since the beginning of this year. Because when you when you get into entrepreneurship, it's really easy. There's a lot of opportunities. A guy tweeted at me today, one of my really close friends, Ben Billups. And I said, the number one business hack is being able to pick one thing and ignore everything else. Do the high priority task and ignore everything else. And then also, as you get information, to not overreact to it. So being tempered in your approach to problems, to success. I've been going through the Daily Stoic every single morning, just kind of thinking through like very core competencies of like how you interact, like good and bad. The parable of the farmer and his son. I mean, just I don't know it. I don't know if it's going to be good. I don't know if it's going to be bad. So just being very tempered in my approach. That's something that I've been looking at for over 6 months now, and it's been helping me out a lot.
That's awesome. Gave me another story idea to write about.
There you go, man.
One piece of advice, if you were to leave just one piece of advice for the next generation, your daughters or any of the kids of the dad gang, what would be one piece of advice for the next gen?
There is no valor in doing things alone. I think there's a lot of people that want to achieve things alone so that they can say they did it. I think the greatest path to success is through connecting and collaborating. And then my ultimate favorite quote is closed mouths don't get fed.
Okay.
I mean, that I've been saying that since I was 5 years old. So closed mouths don't get fed. If you want it, you got to go for it. You got to ask for it.
That's awesome. I think the idea of putting those together, working with others, not being the smartest person in the room, but also being able to speak out loud that's beautiful. And if you were to ask me a question, again, keep you on these topics or if anything else comes to mind, but I can create some content around it myself. What's one question that would come to mind for me?
I think a question that everybody should be asked is why?
Yeah.
It's a big question, right? But we all have our intrinsic whys and internal whys, but I would just say what got you started, what keeps you going, and what do you want your legacy to be when you're gone?
I have, Simon Sinek's book right beside me in terms of Start With Why, as a lot of business leaders probably do.
Great book.
Yeah, it's a good one. For me, on the kind of more extrinsic side, it's, as I mentioned a few moments ago, the idea of helping people who don't know where to turn when it comes to all these things we talked about, but primarily I can get specific enough to say around ownership. Like, so it might be building business as a SaaS company. It might be creating a membership community site, and it might be building an agency, it might be being an author. But for me, there's a whole continuum from tiny side hustle where you make a painting twice a year and you sell it, to like running a full-time business like Bezos did with Amazon and everywhere in between. But I think everyone should own something. Like, that's an idea that I'm super bullish on, that everyone should own something. Naval talks about the idea of educating people about wealth and how it's one of the most important things that we don't teach in school that we should teach. Once I understood that stuff, like you talk about light bulbs going off, it was like 1,000 light bulbs. I was like, damn, that's it, right? Like, own something, and that ownership continuum can change. I used to tell my brother who was wanting to create in Madden, or my other brother who wanted to be an author, that you can, as soon as you start doing that, you own something. You might have to go to work, but you own something. And people don't understand why that's important. Most importantly, they don't understand how. And I think courses are kind of cool, but I think they can, in the next 10 years, I think we'll see them start to be basically freer.
Yeah.
But then the implementation and helping people implement is how we will monetize. And so teaching them why and how it's important to own things, because they're not going to learn that in school, is what keeps me going, because I want to leave that legacy for my daughters.
Be the guide, not the guru.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Everybody needs a guide, I mean, I think a lot of people, you don't have the answer. You only have a set of data points and experiences that you can hopefully help the past versions of yourself succeed.
In their hero's journey, how are you the guide? That's exactly it. 100%. I appreciate that. I could go on for an hour, but I won't. As we wrap here, why and where can people find your work online?
Yeah, absolutely. So legacy builder __ on Twitter, Clifton Sellers on LinkedIn, Branding Daily on Beehive. We can link it all here. And then legacybuilder.co for our agency.
Awesome. Hope they check it all out. Appreciate you so much for taking the time to do this today. And something tells me it won't be the last time.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. I'd love to come back.
Boom. Mic drop.
Sweet. We did it, man.